Members, the House is in committee for the consideration of the Appropriation Financial Review Bill, which is the financial review debate. The committee is considering the report of the Maori Affairs Committee on the non-departmental appropriations for the treaty vote treaty negotiation. The Honourable Christopher Finlayson has the call, should he wish to pick it up. Otherwise, I shall put the question if no other member is seeking a call on treaty negotiations. So the question is that the report of the Maori Affairs Committee on the 2012-13 financial review of non-departmental appropriations for vote treaty negotiations be noted. Those of that opinion will say aye, contrary no. The ayes have it. Members, we now move to the next one, which has been indicated of interest, which is the Social Services Select Committee on the Ministry of Social Development. Jacinda Ardern. Thank
you, Mr. Chair. It's my pleasure to take a short call on the estimates for social services. And Mr. Chair, I think it's appropriate that we reflect on recent events in this portfolio. For the last few months, the government has been claiming that they have made progress on key indicators. Now, when I say key indicators, Mr. Chair, I don't mean actually necessarily child poverty, because the government has chosen not to make that a public service target. No, child poverty has not been embedded within the government's key goals for this portfolio. Instead, it's decided to pick off things like immunisation, insulation of housing and so on. And no one is denying that they are important areas where we'd like to see gains. But, Mr. Chair, it would be disingenuous to suggest that any of those do anything to make a nudge, make a dent in the core issue of child poverty itself. But even then, Mr. Chair, even though it is not a key goal of the government to reduce child poverty, they have still made a claim. In fact, the Minister of Finance made a claim in the chair today that has been one of the key focuses of this government. Says the government, who have spent probably the most substantive amount of government spend on tax breaks, which did not positively affect those families. That minister still tried to claim that at the fore of his thinking was child poverty and income inadequacy. Now, how can that be? Because where have we seen a dent in child poverty figures? The reality is that we haven't. The one thing that, if you ask the government what they've done on child poverty, the one thing they continue to raise is we're focused on moving people from benefits into work. Well, Mr. Chair, that completely ignores the fact that for 2 out of 5 of the children living in poverty, and that's probably likely to change based on the recalculations that are happening as we speak, 2 out of 5 children living in poverty are in the homes of the working poor. They are in families where those parents are fulfilling the old social contract of old that if you work a 40-hour week, you can provide for your family. Not so. Not so under this government. We have a new class of working poor, and the government refuses to address income inadequacy, and as long as it does, it will not make a dent in our child poverty statistics. And in fact, we know, Mr. Chair, that the stats are actually worse than we first thought. For a long time now, we've been ashamed by the fact that we have 265,000 children living in poverty. We now know, as of a week ago, that we have 285,000 children in poverty. That is 27% of children in New Zealand. How do we know? Well, we know that Treasury made a mistake. It double counted the accommodation supplement. There are more families worse off than we first thought. But actually, there's another devastating statistics that we haven't placed enough emphasis on. There is an increase in the number of families who are living on not 60% of the median household income, which is the general measure we tend to use. They're on 50% or less. That means the number of families living in severe poverty has increased from 12% to 14%. That is something that all of us should be worried about. Now, what is the government reaction to that? Well, actually, they've said, well, even then, even though there are 20,000 more children than we first thought in poverty, we've still made good progress because it's less than 2010, when we reached a ridiculous high of 300,000 children in poverty, another new stat based on the recalculation. So apparently we should celebrate that we've gone from absolutely dismal, ridiculous failure to shameful failure. There is nothing to celebrate, Mr. Chair, in any of those statistics. The fact remains, and not enough is still being done by this government to move away from the in-kind assistance that they've focused on to addressing the systemic change. Now, everything that the government has put out to try and step away from the fact we have this now higher and more shameful child poverty statistic has been about working for families. Look, we've got working for families, that's cushioned the recession. And secondly, all that this does is prove that the recession was worse than we thought. Well, Mr. Chair, I'd like to challenge that. No one is doubting that the recession had an economic impact. No one is questioning that. But also, on this side of the House, our argument has been that it was within the government's power to do something that would actually change that, and they didn't.
Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 285,000 children in